Over to you, ladies.
Hello, I'm Wendy Charles Warner. I'm the Chair of Education Otherwise. I'm also an independent researcher in the field of home education, and I first started home educating in the early 1980s, so I know a little bit about it. I'll pass over to Alison.
Hi, I'm Alison Sauer. I'm the chair of the Centre for Personalised Education. We're a charity that deals with non-mainstream education and critiques mainstream education. So we're a bit of a think tank and a discussion place, really. We also support some of the out-of-school settings, such as democratic education settings. I'm also an independent special needs advocate for children and families, and also a child protection advocate. And my background, to a certain extent, is education and child protection law. And Wendy and I work together very, very closely on a lot of things. So you'll find that our minds are quite similar on things, and we've been doing this for a long time. I used to home educated for over 20 years, and I've had a child in school as well as children who didn't go to school at all. So right, okay, so what we just want to, we'll start off with giving you a few basic do's and don'ts, and then as things come to mind with you, whatever it is, just put them in the chat, and if we can answer them straight off, we'll just answer them straight off. But if they need a bit more clarification, we'll invite you onto the stage, so to speak, and then we'll have a chat about it, if that's all right. So we're going to start with communication with the local authority, and in particular telephone calls. Wendy, tell us about that.
If you make a telephone call to the local authority or you accept a call from them to give them information about your education, you do not know what notes they're taking, you don't know what information they've recorded. It's not wise because you have no record. It's much better to arrange to give information in a format where you have a record of that information, because if at some future point you need to refer to what was said or done in that information session, you need to have that record to hand.
The other point about that is that, and it's a related point, is that if you're on a telephone, you're answering questions immediately. You're not giving yourself time to think about the answers to them, and you can be pushed into a corner very quickly. So we always say the best communication is in writing anyway. So if they're making a request of you, or they want to chat to you about something or whatever, then you might say, could you please put that in writing? Or something along those lines, or I really require all communication between us to be in writing. And of course that creates the track record, as has been mentioned. But the other thing is that don't ever be pushed into making a decision or answering something just to either fill the space or because they've asked it there and then. It's very tempting, because you may well be quite nervous because these people are people in authority. So it's very tempting to just fire off the first thing you think, and you can get yourself into trouble. So if you are doing things in writing, you can write them in your own time, and then we have some rules about writing to local authorities, and particularly if you're writing a report or something. When I say rules, I mean they are suggested guidelines, and those are that one, you don't send anything straight away, you sleep on it. And two, you get somebody else to check whatever you've written for both content and grammar.
And also, when you get somebody else to check it, get somebody who actually has experience and understands what the local authority is looking for.
Yeah.
Education Otherwise offers a report checking service, and the checked reports come to me quite often prior to being returned to the parent. And we see, this week, for example, I received one that had only 4 lines of text, and the parent had been told that that was enough. It isn't. So do ensure that whoever's checking it, whether it's our charity or another organisation, actually understands what the local authority is looking for.
It does depend what stage you're at in the process, though. I mean,
Yes.
technically and legally, local authorities are not entitled to demand a report on an annual basis. That is not what the law says. They are entitled to make informal inquiries as and when appropriate. Appropriate does not mean annually. So local authorities have come a long way in their bad behaviour, and there's been a lot of policy creep. So we're ending up having to support people writing a lot more reports than otherwise would be acceptable. And hopefully, with the discussions around this schools bill that's come in, we can maybe take it back a bit, and make oh, there we go. That's a
I,
good one. That's a
I
good
can
one.
pick, I can pick that one up if that's all right,
Go
Alison.
for it.
Um, we've been asked in the chat, can you possibly discuss tips for if a home education officer doorsteps a family, please? It's exactly the same if anybody that
Can
you're
you
not
explain
prepared.
what doorstepping is, Wendy,
Oh,
before?
yes, apologies. Doorstepping. When we refer to doorstepping, we're talking about somebody who turns up at your home and knocks on the door uninvited, asking you questions, and in this case, about your child's education. If the person is invited or you've arranged to meet that person, that is not the same thing. This is somebody attending uninvited or unagreed. Now, the reason that is not a good thing for you to comply with is exactly the same as not taking a telephone call. You're put on the spot. You may not find it convenient. You may have something else on your mind. I'm aware of a mum who got doorstepped as she had her child on her breast and was trying to deal with a phone call from a terminally ill parent. It's you do not give of your best when you are not prepared. So when somebody turns up at your door, you must always be polite. Just very politely say, I'm terribly sorry, but it's not convenient at the moment. Could you possibly put what you want to ask in writing? If they become persistent, you then make sure you have your foot behind the door, by the way. You then say to them, I'm sorry, but I have explained that this is not convenient. I will respond if you write to me, but I'm closing the door now. And then without another word, you close the door. Maintain politeness, but remember this is your home.
Yes, it's not like it's school premises and Ofsted are allowed to come along and inspect the records. So you aren't a school, you are a private family, and local authority officers tend to forget that. And there's been a lot of mission creep over the past few years, where local authorities are inserting themselves between parents and children, and it's not acceptable. There's a lot of talk, and it's come about certainly when Lord Soley introduced his bill a few years ago, which was the foundation for one of the foundations for this current ridiculous bill. He said that the rights of the parents and the rights of the children were in conflict. They absolutely are not. That's an absolute nonsense. That's come down from international arenas where there's this belief that the state should control children because they need to control the citizenship, and that's the only way to make sure there's no terrorism and there's not dual societies and things like that. It's a deeply embedded philosophical neoliberal belief, and we do have to guard against it, because that is what allows this creep every day into our lives. Anybody got any more questions? Come on, you must be brimming with it.
While they're thinking about it, I'll add a little bit to that. The United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child specifically states that parents will have the best interests of their children at heart, and that nations should act on that basis. So to suggest that children and parents are in conflict actually goes against international law. Come on, I know you've got questions too. So let's have some questions, and then we're telling you what you want to know.
They were much more vocal last year, weren't they?
Were
Everybody's got quite subdued this year. Has anybody got any examples of how they've dealt with their own issues with local authorities? That would be interesting to hear.
shall we talk a little bit about what information the local authority is and is not entitled to? Firstly,
yes, and the difference between an informal inquiry and a formal inquiry.
Yeah. Firstly, If the local authority makes an inquiry of you, you are not legally obliged to respond. However, precedent, that's what people refer to as case law, is very clear that it would be wise to do so. And the government guidance takes that a little bit further by saying that if you do not do so, the local authority can assume that the education is not suitable. So whenever the local authority makes an inquiry, you should respond to it. However, how you respond to it is entirely up to you. And an informal inquiry should be the first stage, and it should be exactly that. It should be informal. So you might choose, if you prefer to, though we don't advise it, to have a call with a local authority officer. You may decide you want to meet with a local authority officer. You may decide to put a report in writing. You may obtain a third-party independent report. Or you may decide to gather together a huge box full of work that your child's been doing and send it to them to look at. It doesn't matter. It's your decision. So at an informal inquiry, it's your decision of how you respond. And that response should be able to be a light touch, is what they refer to in the DfE. Light touch means that unless that response creates a concern, which is a reasonable concern, that should be the end of the matter. Alison, would you like to take on the formal inquiry bit?
Okay, so if after those light touch inquiries, and it's an E for enquiries, it's not an I for inquiries. Inquiry suggests an investigation rather than just the simple asking of a couple of questions. So if they suspect that a suitable education is not taking place, they're supposed to have a bit of a conversation with you in writing or whatever, where they say, where they highlight how you can improve your provision or improve the information that you're giving them in order that they don't have those worries. After that process, it can then move to what's called formal inquiries. And this is where you will be issued with something called a Section 437 notice to satisfy. And that is Section 437 of the Education Act 1996, which is where all the home ed bits are. That's the act all the home ed bits of law are in, really, apart from deregistration.
Yeah.
And what that means is that you will need to give them a little bit more information so that they are very reassured, basically, so that you satisfy their concerns. Unfortunately, we have a lot of bad behaviour from local authorities at the moment, local authorities who are asking, for example, for samples of work. There is no point that they can demand samples of work from you. There is no point. There's no part in law that says they are allowed to demand samples of work from you. And they should not be demanding more information than a court of law would ask. A court of law would have you stand up on the stand and give a statement, a verbal statement, or send in a written statement, or a combination of the two. They would take your word to be your word. There is no law that says that the local authority are allowed to demand more than your word in this instance. So there's been a bit of a pushback recently from the home educating community to this over-intrusive interference. And indeed, we've had a conversation with the DfE. More of the conversation was going on overnight, was it not, Wendy? Where we were explaining very carefully in words of one syllable to them that local authorities are behaving appallingly and treating informal inquiries as formal inquiries. So we may get some movement on that. I don't know. So watch this space. Sandrine had a really good question there about she's been invited to a home education picnic by her local authority. Sandrine, which one is your LA? Can you say which LA are you in?
Shall I pick that one up?
Pick it up while we're waiting for her to tell us which LA she's in.
Basically, we often get people asking to us, but surely if I don't meet the education officer, or if I don't do X, or if I don't do Y, then I will look as if I have something to hide. No, that isn't the case. What you've got to look at is you actually have the right to privacy. You have the right to meet with who you consider to be the right person to meet with, and there is never a requirement for you to meet with the education officer. There is a tiny exception to that, which I'll come to in a minute. So no, it doesn't appear as if you've got something to hide. It simply confirms that you are a person who prefers to choose who you meet with. And when people use the term, you've got nothing to hide, then I like to be a little bit irreverent and to say, well, actually, I never walk down the street totally naked. And this is the point. Just because you've got nothing to hide doesn't mean to say you want to display what you do have.
Yeah,
And
so we say nothing to hide and a lot to protect.
that's right, precisely. Coming to the tiny exception to the requirement to meet, there is a piece of legal precedent which says that in exceptional circumstances, the local authority could insist on a meeting with the parent and the children. But it was truly exceptional, and they cannot use that except in exceptional circumstances. The circumstances of that case were that the parents had already been prosecuted and had agreed that they would in future meet with the local authority. So they had had a school attendance order overturned on the basis of agreeing to meet with the local authority. The family also consisted of two disabled parents, a very large number of children, and in very difficult circumstances. So everything within that situation was truly exceptional. And that, I'll repeat because it bears it, does not give the local authority the right to meet with you. So no, you have nothing to hide, and as Alison says, everything to protect.
I just want to add a little bit of something onto this, and that is that the local authority inviting you to a picnic at the same time as saying, I don't want to go and it's my right not to go. Also, have a little think about that local authority's intentions here. Would they be inviting you to a picnic in order to discuss your, or would they be trying to improve their relationship with the home educating community?
Yeah.
So there is a balance to be had there. If you can all go along anonymously, that's fantastic, because then you can start to develop a relationship with that local authority person. Imagine this, so there's no training to speak of out there for local authority officers. They just don't have any training. They don't meet many home educators. They can't understand anything outside of school education. Something like 50% of the people dealing with home education don't even have a relevant degree. Or anything like that. She says, I don't have a degree either, but that's beside the point. But the point being that there may actually be a genuine desire to start to understand the people that they are supposed to be dealing with. And the more we develop a good relationship, the better. Just recently, I undertook a piece of work to work with Oxfordshire local authority, where a few things had gone absolutely horrifically wrong, really stupid stuff, and the entire community was beginning to really set against Oxfordshire. And Oxfordshire have never been a bad authority. They've not been super duper wonderful like Lancashire used to be until a few weeks ago, but neither have they been absolutely awful. So I set up a meeting along with a local home educator, and we brought all the issues to the table. This person was the manager of the department. We created a relationship. We explained the issues. She went away. She flipping dealt with them, came back. Everybody's happy. That could have gone the other way. If we hadn't have said, right, let's develop a relationship, let's talk about the issues, let's really have a good discussion, that might have ended up being a very hostile environment and the local authority entrenched in their position and carrying on like that. Sandrine, do you want to come on? Do you want to stick your camera on? We'd love to see you, or just your voice if you want. It's up to you.
I don't mind. Sorry, I haven't got I'm having a bad hair day. So.
Oh, don't worry about that. Just talk then. That's fine.
It's all right. Yeah, no, it's just, I haven't got anything to hide, obviously, at all. In fact, I think Wendy read my report yesterday, but, it's just, with all the kind of the background narrative, everything that's been, that you read that's been talked about the schools bill and in the groups and everything. And then the local authority kind of person that wrote to me, kind of, trying to be very friendly and kind of like, inviting us to a local authority run home ed picnic. It just, I don't know, really. It just made me feel a bit uncomfortable, really. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's because you feel fearful already, because they feel like they're in authority, and there are things that they might make a judgment about you, maybe.
Let's pick that up, Sandrine. Think about this. Not very far from you, I actually did some work in Warwickshire a few months ago. Not very far from where you live, there is a local authority where virtually all of the parents absolutely love the local authority officer. But that wasn't like that a few years ago. So how did they get to that stage? The only way they can get to that stage is if both the home educating community and the local authority officer are willing to put their fears to one side and actually communicate. Because you can't develop a positive relationship or positive behaviour from your local authority officers if you treat any positive sounding approaches as if they are trying to undermine you. They may be, but the point is that when we first meet somebody, then we generally give them the benefit of the doubt before we judge them as being antagonistic to us. So you don't go there and give them everything that you have. You don't introduce your name. You don't give them detail that you do not want to part with. But you might go along and just listen and just see what they've got to say and make a judgment based on what actually is happening. And that's happened in lots of areas where Alison and I have gone into local authority areas with local home educating people, and the relationships have improved exponentially because some people have had the courage to meet and to talk about what's wrong and to try and address it, which is exactly what we're doing as chairs of groups by going to the DFE and the head of service and ministers. We are doing what you're doing with your local authority officer, but rather sort of more, shall we say, in loftier circles, which are somewhat harder to approach.
We're still scared the bejeebus out of the DFE. It's fine. Thank you, Sandrine. So there's another really good point here that Dore has put in. Why do they keep contacting us even when in the past they've visited and marked as exceeding expectation? They shouldn't, really. Frankly, they shouldn't keep visiting you. They should be concentrating on people they're actually worried about, rather than for going on fishing expeditions to see whether you've slipped up, and they shouldn't be doing that, and we do need to push back on that. But they have been encouraged by the DFE to annually contact, and an annual contact doesn't mean that they should be asking for a report. It could be, is your name and address still the same, and are your children still home educated? That should be enough. That should be enough, and maybe they go for a little bit more detail at certain key points, like when you start home educating, when you transition from, if you were at school, you would transition from primary to secondary, at the point at which you would start thinking about taking GCSEs, and then maybe at 16 when you were thinking of your next options. I would be going for those 4 in the school history of a child. That is the school age of a child. Those are the 4 points points I would be asking for more information from. And maybe we have to give a little bit of a pushback and at least try to get them to pull back from that. Wendy, you want to say something?
Yes, legal precedent, which is that's my expertise. Legal precedent is clear that where there is a duty on a public body, then they may periodically check to ascertain whether that duty is triggered. And that's where the emphasis on the annual contact comes from. But as Alison says, that doesn't mean to say they should be asking you to evidence or to prove that your education is suitable annually. Where they already know that there has been no problem or no concern, then that can simply be, can you please confirm that everything is still okay? Is there any support you would like, or is there any advice we can offer? It doesn't mean that every year they can ask you to provide evidence.
I'm going on that. I just finished my annual report, and we'd submitted a very similar report last year, which, by the way, we didn't even receive an acknowledgement of, let alone any feedback. Nothing. Not even,
so rude.
I know,
so
not
rude.
even a compliment slip through the post. Nothing. And I was so all year, we were like, well, do you think they thought it was okay? Well, we kind of know news is good news, and it's just been, to be thinking like that is just not very nice, really. And so we were written to again and asking either for a report, or we might like to submit samples of work or photos or meet with them, etc., etc. So we kind of said, well, no to all of those. And then we ended up updating our report, which had already been quite lengthy and detailed the first time round. And sort of, because I suppose we'd set a precedent for ourselves, we ended up kind of updating this very long and detailed report. And I'm just thinking, is there an easier way of doing this? Or, what can you say to the local authority? Well, last year we submitted a very detailed report. Things are just ticking along, as they were, or do we need to update that every year?
So it's up to you what approach you take, and just see what their response is, to be quite frank. I'm a bit more hardline than Wendy on this sometimes. I am very much against giving them more than they're entitled to in the first instance, and just seeing how far you can go with it. But you do need to gird your loins a little bit when you do that, because it's quite scary doing that. But they can't slap a section 437 on you just because you say, why do you need all this detail this time round when you said everything was excellent last time round? We're just carrying on as normal. Little Johnny's got a bit further on with his reading. Mary's now doing algebra. Their interests are still developing, blah, 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 blah. There's no reason why you can't try that at the very least and see what happens.
I mean, we I was to say, we updated this very detailed report simply because we had heard nothing, absolutely nothing. What do you do with that?
Well, if you've heard nothing from them and they haven't asked you for information, it's not necessarily for you to send information. You don't have to proactively get in contact with your local authority. You only have to respond if they contact you. But updating can be, as long as you are covering the fact that your children are progressing, because as a child gets older, so they learn more. So if little Johnny, I prefer Fred actually, Alison. If Fred was learning his 2 times tables in 2019, and you say, we're still carrying on, and Fred is still learning his 2 times table in 2022, clearly Fred is not receiving a suitable education. But if you say Fred is now studying simultaneous equations and he's only 8, then clearly Fred is receiving a suitable education. But it doesn't have to be linear progression.
But the other thing is, that can be examples of progression. You don't have to lay out every single area where your child is progressing. This is the point. You're just providing an indication that the education is still personalised to that child, and by personalising it, they are moving on and learning other things. It's not actually even necessarily evidence of progression. It's evidence of change in provision that means that you are suiting the child at the level that they're at.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might discover that your child has dyslexia. Okay, so you might say, well, since his diagnosis of dyslexia, we've changed tack completely because we've decided that this is more important than that, and it's been really great, and we can see them flourishing. That kind of thing. That's fine.
But that is a form of progression. That's the sort of thing I'd include.
It is, but don't think of it in terms of progression like the stuff that they want to see in schools, which in reality doesn't even happen with individual children in schools. What you have to remember is that the curriculum is based on a cohort, not on an individual in schools. And so what they're looking for is linear progression generally of the cohort, not in individual children. And this is where the skill of local authorities can really be seen, when the officers exactly. If you've I don't know if any of you went to Harriet Patterson's presentation. She talks about learning to read. Some children learn to read seemingly overnight. They don't read, they get to 13 and read Lord of the Rings. And then other children will do like a little step thing like this. Some children may seem to regress and go back up again. But it's all okay. It's all absolutely fine. And we have to stop thinking of learning in this linear, I should do it that way, shouldn't I, on this camera? Yeah. In this linear progression. And Megan, yes, it is fair to assume that if you haven't heard from the local authority after sending a report that the education provision is deemed suitable, because you bet your arse they'll be on your arse if it's not.
Now can I make a proviso here? I will give you an example. I won't tell you the name of this local authority, but you'll guess it. This particular local authority asks the parent for information. If the parent doesn't immediately respond with copies of the child's work, they serve a Section 437 notice. That Section 437 notice can come through within a maximum of 10 days. So everybody, and if you respond saying, I'm sorry, but we're not even in the country, it won't stop them. If you say, can you ask me why you're asking, because you only asked me last week, it won't stop them. They will carry on. However, if they happen to be feeling a bit busy and you send them a copious report, 52 pages long.
Generally saying every single colour of felt tip pen you're using, for example.
Yes, precisely. And you don't hear from them for 6 months, you cannot presume that they've decided the education is suitable. Let's even say 6 weeks, but the case I'm thinking of is 6 months. And you then get an email from them saying, I'm sorry about the slight delay in responding to you. Here's a school attendance order. So you can't assume it, but one would generally consider that a delay of more than a few weeks indicates that everything's fine.
In the vast majority of local authorities, you can definitely assume that. It's only the very, very badly behaved ones that you can't assume that. I'm going to cough and say the name.
Yeah.
Portsmouth.
No, Alison, it would be inappropriate for you to say the word Portsmouth, so you better remove that from the recording. But so there are these sorts of questions come up all of the time. And what you've got to go back to is what is reasonable and what is proportionate. Is it reasonable for somebody to demand that you reply within 15 days and then not respond to you for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks?
Well, half of them, Wendy, don't even believe they should acknowledge your. Oh, hello, Roger. That don't even believe they should acknowledge your report at all.
I can give you a really good example of this. I've been waiting. I'm just going to calculate it. just shy of 39 years to hear from my local authority. So it is rude for them not to acknowledge it. It's rude for them not to reply to you. But a great many of them don't. And it's also not uncommon for people to get a follow-up saying you have not responded, and them to say, well, we haven't received anything. So that brings us to another point. When you're sending something in writing, if you're sending it by email, make sure you've got a read receipt. If you're sending it by post, send it signed for.
Absolutely, and then you know that they've received it.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
you have proof of it.
Our report I sent by registered post, and I checked on the Royal Mail tracker, and it was signed for. I kept the receipt. In fact, I think I've still got it in my purse, just in case, because I was so worried. You know, I hadn't heard anything, but I kind of like felt to, and I didn't supply any email address or phone number or anything. You know, I just did it by writing. This year, I'm probably gonna, because there's a falls on the bank holiday, so I'm gonna email it and ask for, I'm going to say, you know, please would you acknowledge receipt of this report, and
That works.
you know, that you're satisfied with it, because last year I sent it by registered post and I didn't hear anything back. I will say that, because I do feel quite put out, that I put a lot of time and effort. You know, we are a very conscientious home educating family. You know, we wrote a very detailed report, and I really do feel quite put out that they didn't even send an acknowledgement.
One little proviso, please don't use the word satisfied.
Oh, okay. What should I use?
Because Sorry. Satisfied is the language that comes into the Section 437 notice bit of legislation. Okay. So then they have to be satisfied. What you're asking is if they have any concerns.
Yeah. So always, that's a very important point that Alison's just raised. When the local authority makes an inquiry of you, you should, when you respond, always say to them that please advise me if you have any specific concerns about my provision. And the reason you do that is because if they're not telling you what their concerns are, you can't address them. And if you sadly come to the situation where you are in court with a local authority, then you can say, well, I don't even know now what your concerns are because you've never told me. And that would mean that they were actually not giving you the opportunity they're supposed to actually address any concerns. And that's a basic tenet of law, is that they must do so. They must provide you with information. So I think Alison's point earlier on about approaching local authority, about being approachable. Everybody's talking about fear. Every single day, Alison and I hear people and read about people who are terrified of their local authority. That should not be the situation. We understand why people are terrified, because some of them wield their power in an unwarranted and oppressive way. But that should not be the situation. So if the local home educating community can try to address that fear by talk to the local authority, try and get them to understand how you are feeling and why you're feeling like that. In most cases, it will work. It really does work. You get the odd nut cases where it doesn't, but in most cases it will. Everybody's gone silent.
I know. We must have answered all their questions. Does anybody want to ask anything about the bill while we're here?
Yeah. I can make a comment on the bill.
That it's not fit for purpose and it's a pile of poo and it's not even worthy of being used as toilet paper?
Apart from that fact, but and apart from the fact that it looks like in places it's written by monkeys, but if somebody hands you a bill, and let's use that term slightly incorrectly, you check it to see if it's reasonable and to see if it contains only what you've agreed to before you pay it. This bill just simply does not stand up to that check. It doesn't stand up to whether it's reasonable, and I certainly wouldn't be paying it.
We had a delightful experience last Friday where I pointed out one particular clause to the senior civil servants, where they basically kind of contradicted themselves and created a situation that was grossly unfair and could have been challenged in a court, and they went, "It doesn't say that," and I went, "It does," and pointed the section out to them, and they went, "A funny colour."
He went, we've got another question. Are there any other words that you would suggest we avoid? Yes, please. When you're writing a report or giving information, you don't say, we did maths. You say, Fred did maths. The report is about your child's education. It's not about you. Don't put in personal information. It's not the business of the local authority to know how much you've paid for something, who you live with, what your sexuality is, what illnesses you've got, and whether or not you're struggling to pay the rent. Or
it's not an opportunity. It's not an opportunity to tell everybody you're a Christian or you're a vegan. Those things have no relevance, and in fact, they can lead to judgments that you don't want them to make.
Yeah, so you do not give them what you do is give them information relevant to the education. So say, for example, your child has just lost a close relative. That might be relevant, but you don't say, I've been nursing my granny for the last 3 months and she suddenly died last week, so I really don't feel that I'm mentally able to respond to you, which is the sort of thing we see.
So let me just do the local authority interpretation on what you've just said. So for the last 3 months, you've not been providing a suitable education, and now you're in such a mental state that you can't provide a suitable education for the foreseeable future, and you can't even be bothered to pull yourself together enough to communicate with me.
Right, now let's see the better way of doing it. The local authority contacts you, you're in the same position, and you reply saying, I acknowledge receipt of your letter. Unfortunately, we have had a death of a close relative, so there will be some delay in me responding to you, and I'll have my information to you no later than 2 weeks' time.
So then the local authority goes, "Oh, that's awful. What a shame. Okay, I'll look forward to seeing what you've got to say then."
Some other things. If you're writing a report, don't use contractions. Don't, won't, can't, shan't. Don't use text speak. Don't say things like, "Oh, we really love this. It were great." It is a formal document. It could end up in a court of law. Treat it as a formal document. So you don't say, etc., e.g., contractions or.
Well, you can put examples. You can put for example, but one of the things that Wendy and I talk about with reports is about making negative comments. So don't put things in your report that say things like, he doesn't like writing, so we do, don't do that. You do something else. You don't say doesn't, can't, won't, because that makes you sound like some kind of feckless parent who lets your children get. I mean, I know, the vast majority of you out there are attachment parents, and we're not authoritarian with our children. Local authorities don't understand that. They particularly do not understand that in the context of education. So saying don't, won't, can't is not helpful. So what you can do is you can say, so instead of I'll use Fred if I must, instead of Fred Fred doesn't like writing with a pen, you could say Fred prefers to produce his written work on a computer. So can you see that there's a difference between the positive thing and the negative thing, and that can change an entire local authority officer's attitude with regard to your education.
That's also brings us to things like I often see in reports, and we will advise removing it. Fred used to go to a maths club, but he didn't like it, so he doesn't go any longer. He used to go to here and he doesn't like it, so he doesn't go any longer. Don't say that.
Don't talk about the past. Don't talk about the past and what he's given up. Talk about the future and what he's doing now.
What you do is say, Fred really enjoys this. But then again, don't talk about the future in long terms. If you've got something very special planned, like Fred is just about to commence a project on spaceships and he's been invited to visit the space observatory, that's great, because you're saying something very positive. But don't say, we are hoping that we may be able to buy a such and such a course in a few months' time, or we're hoping we might be able to, or Fred thinks he might do a course on this. It's not happening now, and if you do not do what you've referred to, the local authority will come back to you and say, but you said he was going to do this and he hasn't done it. So it's that sort of thing. Yes, it is absolutely acceptable for a child to use a keyboard instead of writing by hand. I have a grandchild in a school who does precisely that because he struggles with handwriting, and schools throughout the country, good schools, accept a child using a keyboard if they have problems with writing.
Even if they don't have problems. So yes. It's as I've put in the chat. Why tell the local authority that it's all on a computer? Just say he prefers to produce written work on a computer. That would be fine. But also, even if the only written work he does is writing a shopping list, you can, in all honesty, claim that he can write, and he does write from time to time by hand, even if it's just a shopping list.
You come to the child who is articulate, they're literate, they're well able to put together, I'll give you an example of a child who at age 12 was doing degree work and the relevant essays for that, and who could not put pen to paper. That child did not write a single line on paper for several years, and yet was working at a level several years ahead of themselves. And quite honestly, I could show you my written information. If you can read that, you're a better person than I am, because I cannot read my own writing. And
then,
yeah,
she relies on my notes.
Yeah, and so I use a keyboard. We are now a society of technology, and keyboards are the norm.
Somebody said, let me just bring that up again. Where can a parent turn to if they do bump into issues with their local authority? Well, Wendy and I run, I don't know if any of you know, but on Facebook, Wendy and I run a group called Home Education in Your Local Authority Help Dealing with Officialdom. It's generally referred to as the Officialdom group. And there we strictly only deal with issues with local authorities. We also step outside of it a bit, and when there's separated parents issues or divorce issues or things like that, we will deal with that. And what we're trying to do, we're trying to build a community of people who can help each other, because the same issues come up again and again and again. So the whole point is that in that group, firstly, we hope that the community can help itself, and then if they can't, then Wendy and I will step in. How many members have we got on there now, Wendy?
Just over 19,000.
Yeah, there we go. That's not 19,000, Megan. That's a few more than 19,000. I think your zero slip there.
Yeah, we've got just over 19,000 members, and at some stage, most of those people have at some point asked for some advice. But you can also ring the Education Otherwise helpline. It's run by volunteers, and you may take a while to get through. But if you've got a problem, that will generally, if it's a problem that can't be dealt with by the volunteer, it will come back to me. And if it's a problem that's more relevant to Alison, or where both of us need to work together, it will be we will do that to offer what support we can.
Yeah, so I'm not always very visible in that group because I do spend 20-25 hours doing work for CPE, and I also do actually have a job in the film industry that I'm supposed to do, that actually does pay me some money, which this doesn't pay me any money, so I have to make a contribution to the household. So I'm sometimes not very visible there, but what you will find is that we are it's the day of husbands coming into the room.
No.
Hello, Ralph.
I can be got hold of if it's something that is my particular area of expertise, and my area of expertise that is outside of home education, that's in addition to home education, is actually flexi schooling and the out of school settings. So you can what are you asking, Megan? Let's have a look. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's probably all I've got to say. Are there any more questions? Anybody want to tell us any experiences that they've had?
We've missed one. We've missed one from Carol.
Oh, go on.
My SEN child is making progress, but it is very slow and definitely not linear. How could that be explained and evidenced for a local authority? How do we know if the progress will be enough? Well, I can tell you what my colleague I occasionally work with says about this, and that's a world-renowned education psychologist, and that is, if your child is doing something now that they could not previously do, your child is receiving an education. With a special needs child, it's quite important that you mention their special needs. So, for example, if the child has got very severe dyslexia, and it's important that you mention that when you're saying that the child cannot write accurately, because you're giving a context. And what the law says is the education should be suitable to the child's age, ability, aptitude, and any special needs that they have. Now, what happens is local authorities tend to get stuck on the age bit of that, and you have got to take them from the age bit and take them into the ability, aptitude, and special needs. And you do that by referring to it. So say, for example, you're being questioned about why your child is only doing age 5 work and your child is 9. Your response to that is, my child has does not have an aptitude for maths because my child has severe dyspraxia, and my child has severe this, that, and the other. And we accommodate the child's special needs by, and you explain how you're supporting them to move on where they are now. And no, the special need does not need to be diagnosed. The Equality Act is very clear about that. The Equality Act applies to somebody who not only has a diagnosed or recognised disability, but who appears to have such an ability. So if they did not take account of undiagnosed needs, which you are describing, the local authority would be in breach of the Equality Act.
In addition, what you have to remember is that if you have an EHCP, that's an education and healthcare plan, then what the definition of a suitable education for that child is one which meets the needs which are laid out in that document. Just the needs, doesn't make the provision, doesn't necessarily reach the outcomes, but meets the needs. Okay, so that's the section you have to concentrate on if you have an EHCP. If you think your child could benefit from an EHCP, now that has to, I would say, go and have discussions with people who understand special needs before you apply for an EHCP for a home educated child. So, for example, if your child's just simply dyslexic, probably an EHCP would just bring a lot of complication into your life that's not worth it.
Oh, yes.
A diagnosis of dyslexia, however, would be quite useful, but then you could use that when that child went to college or university, and then it would be of great use. Whereas if your child has autism that affects them in a profound way, so they've got a lot of sensory issues, for example, or something like that, then sometimes an EHCP can be quite useful. And one part of getting an EHCP is that the local authority are supposed to provide some form of diagnosis, or at least assessment, to see whether your child requires an EHCP. And that can be quite useful in you understanding the issues of your child. If you've got a bit of money, however, I would recommend possibly not going for an EHCP, but going to a private psychologist. And we have a short list, and it's a very short list of private psychologists that we recommend, who can come up with stuff that is really, really useful to you, and will give you the tools to deal with your child's special needs. And when I say a bit of money, we're probably talking between £1,000 and £2,000.
Yeah, on average. What you've got to also bear in mind is that if you apply for an EHCP, it can take up to 3 years to actually get it in some areas. I don't think I've known it take less than a year in the last.
It's not supposed to, by the way. It's not supposed to. There are time limits, and they break those time limits all the time. But you can still go to tribunal if they break those time limits. So the power is with you right now.
But it will take a while. It's not. You get children who have really severe needs are refused EHCPs, and currently there was an article hit the press about how poor special needs provision is in school, and the DFE response to that article just a few weeks ago was to say that we need to raise the bar for who gets an EHCP. So basically, rather than saying, oh gosh, we need to support these children, the approach is, oh gosh, we've got to make it harder for these children to actually qualify for support. So you've got this problem. There's another problem that arises in that a lot of local authorities will claim, and CAMS will tell you, that they can't make an assessment for a child who's home educated and not in the school system because they need 2 different environments to assess it. It's simply not true. It simply isn't true.
And the other thing is that if you apply for an EHCP as a parental request for an assessment to see whether an EHCP is appropriate or not, when you make that parental request, which you make through the local authority or to the local authority, get all your ducks in a row first. Get a lot of evidence, get a lot of letters, a lot of testimonials. If your child goes to Cubs or Scouts or something like that, get a testimonial saying what his difficulties are. If it goes to dance class, get a testimonial. If it goes to, if you know a parent, for example, who has a professional standing somehow, who goes to your local home ed group, get a letter from them to identifying what their difficulties are, and you'll be a few of those, and they will have a very hard time refusing to do an assessment. And if they do refuse to go do an assessment, you can still go to tribunal. So if you're looking at special needs, there are 2 websites you need to look at. The first one is IPSEA, IPSEA. They are very good. They've got the law down pat. The second one is Special Needs Jungle. And both of those have lawyers that inform them, and they are really tight on the law. They're very, very good, and they're written so that people like you can understand what they're saying rather than anybody else. Carol, I too would be nervous for applying for an EHCP given the schools bill situation right now. I haven't gone through. Angela Kirkpatrick is our SEN expert, and my specialism, I don't know whether any of you have been on the Home Education Action Group on Facebook, which is a group that I run. But my specialism is condensing issues into bullet point lists. That's one of my superpowers, is doing that. And I haven't yet done it for special needs. The list I've produced is not is not necessarily applicable to special needs. I have to go through the bill again and with Angela to produce a bullet point list of issues with the bill with special needs. That is going to take me some weeks, I am afraid, because there is a lot to look at. Okay, I think we're done. Any final questions? It's been absolutely delightful talking to you all. Well, when I say talking to you all, it is talking to you rather than with you, really, because it's been a bit quiet. But I hope it's been really, really helpful. Lovely.
Thank you very much.
You are
Thanks,
welcome.
Alison. Thank you, Wendy. That was amazing.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.